All right, folks. I'm recording this extra little video here to talk about basically a new feature in Python that has been present in Python now since version 3.10, I believe. Um, and if you've coded in other languages, and I feel like I'm always saying that in all my videos, but it's helpful. Like if you know code in one language and you start learning in another language, you look for the comparisons and what matches from one language to another. We were just doing content in chapter 3 where we were talking about if statements, and uh, for example, if this happens, then do this. Else, if this happens, do this. Else, do that. Right. And when you start to create if statements where you're checking multiple conditions, and for example, if I am checking, for is it the number 1? Is it the number 2? Is it the number 3? Is it the number 4? And then I'm taking an action based upon that. A lot of you will recognize that in other languages, we have this thing called switch case statements, right? This is common in Java, C Sharp, JavaScript, and a number of other languages. And what it is, it's a way to write programming code. And maybe this is like where I could pull in W3 schools here really quick, and maybe just go to a language like, let's say Java. And somewhere in here, they're going to have like a switch case. There we go. Switch statement in Java. So I'll just give you this is what it looks like in Java. And so you have like whatever thing you're checking, right? So let's say you're checking for a letter, and then you find that letter. And if the letter matches up with the case, then you execute the code, right? And then when you're done executing the code, you break out of the statement. And then you sometimes have a default. So if none of the cases hit, it's kind of like an else. And so where this kind of thing is handy, I'll give you a scenario. Like if I'm building a website and I have a user go to a form and they're filling out their address and they have a little box for the state and they choose Wisconsin or Illinois or whatever they choose from it. And then I go, if it's from Wisconsin, we charge them sales tax. If it's from Illinois, we don't, for example, right? But there's 50 states, right? So you can see the conundrum here. So can you imagine writing an else if statement that said else if Wisconsin, else if Minnesota, else if whatever, right? It gets really tedious. And so they came up with these switch case statements to kind of hotwire that a little bit and simplify the syntax. Python, up until like a year ago, did not have this feature, right? And when I first encountered like if else statements in Python, I'm like, well, why don't they have switch case statements like for really long ones? And like, well, they just don't. I'm like, well, that's dumb, right? Well, somebody listened, not to me necessarily, but they came up with what they call a match case statement. So switch must not be a keyword allowable in Python, but it works basically the same way. The concept is whatever thing you're checking, right? You can check that value and then execute a piece of code. Now, what's kind of interesting here is they are doing this with an OR operator. So in Python, that's another way to say OR is the pipe, right? So we haven't really talked about that yet, but that's not the important part here. So you can check cases in Python, and where it becomes super, super helpful is when you have a whole bunch of things to check, not like 1 or 2 or 10, but maybe 50. Right? So if you can do a match case statement instead, this is kind of the syntax for it. There's also the default. You'll notice in Python, instead of saying the word default like they did in Java, or you do in most languages, they just use the underscore, meaning this happens if the other scenarios don't catch. Right? So this is one of the newest Python features. I'm not really going to demo it, but I just want to talk about it because I do think it's important for people to know. And I don't know exactly when this came into play. I know they were like demoing it for a while, and then I think it was roughly a year and a half ago they added it to 3.1. And I think if you go to the Python site now, we're on 3.12 or 1.4 or something like that. So new feature, no exercises related to it. Our book doesn't even talk about it because it was printed before this came out. but this is a language on the move, folks, right? And this is just another powerful tool in the arsenal. When I was looking on W3 to find this, and I thought I had it, but I don't see it listed here yet. Like it should be right near if else, but it's not, by the way. All right. But I would assume eventually they will add it. All right. That's the info, folks. So this video and